Hi everyone, welcome to the Performance Cafe. And specifically, I would like to welcome you to the second episode of our Coffee Companion series, where we share coffee, maybe some biscuits, and learnings every Friday. And we talk about human performance in organizations. Today, we're joined by Herman Singh, and I'm so pleased to have him here. Herman is an executive director and a professor for business transformation and startup acceleration. He also enjoys helping others find their way to the future successfully while achieving their purpose. He's also the author of Di-Volution. Welcome, Herman.
Hi, Ines. It's great to be here. Thank you for the invite, and hello to all your listeners and viewers.
Thanks so much. It's so nice to have you here. I've had the honor of working with you before on webinars and stuff, and it's always great to learn something from you. So I think I know you. I certainly feel like I know you well. Would you mind just telling our viewers a little bit about yourself, where you come from, and where Di-Volution came from?
Thank you. So I'm an engineer. I basically spent 40 years working in the engineering field, 20 years basically building the industrial backbone of the country, of South Africa and Africa, building things like gold mines and power stations and power distribution lines and beer plants and sugar plants, etc. I spent 20 years doing that, and I ended my career in that industry at Siemens as a managing director of the industry division group. I then spent the next 20 years of my life basically building the commercial backbone of South Africa. So having been very involved in building the industrial backbone, I spent 20 years building the commercial backbone. And so, that involved things like the telecommunications networks, banks, ATM rollouts, point-of-sale devices, as well as music streaming, video streaming, and instant messaging services. So my life is very much around building systems, typically involving technology in order to build businesses. So having spent my life building businesses with technology, what struck me was the powerful role that technology was having in the world of business, number one. And number two, the fact that what was happening was we were basically dissolving companies and we were recasting them in a more efficient form using technology. And it was no different basically to what happens with a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. A caterpillar dissolves its body, hollows itself out, and it recrafts itself and recreates itself. And so I use the word Di-Volution basically as a short form of digital evolution, because that's actually what's happening here is digital evolution, transforming analog, old, manual, paper-intensive processes to things that are now totally one click to buy. That's basically where we're hitting, and that's where the term came from.
Wonderful. So I love your analogy of the butterfly that actually has to dissolve itself. So many people are really keen to get back to normal. It's kind of like, it seems to be the holy grail right now, is that we've got to get back to normal. How realistic is that?
Well, two points on that. The first point is what is normal? And the second point is what is the new normal likely to look like? And is it going to look anything like what we had? So what is normal? I guess, in a sense, normal is whatever we are accustomed to. And if you went back 150 years, normal would have been living on a farm. That would have been normal. And so this concept of normality is actually a very subjective thing. If you jump on a plane and you fly across the Limpopo for 2 hours, you'll find a normal there that's totally different to what the normal is that we live in and experience in South Africa. The second point, I guess, is so having said that it's subjective, the second point is what is the so-called normal going to look like, and is it going to look anything like what we had? My own view is no. I've actually made the comment a few times that I think our future is going to be a lot like the 1980s, but with internet and cell phones. Why do I say that? Well, in the 1980s, we basically went to drive-ins, we went to roadhouses, we did drive-through banking, we had one TV in the house, we had one income in the house, and we had one car in the house. And we didn't eat out that often. And actually, in a sense, that's kind of where we're going back to. And why are we going back there? Well, because firstly, we're entering a world that's going to be more about an isolation economy. We need to be separate from each other. And that's going to be around for a long time, actually. At least 4 to 5 years, judging by the impact on the travel industry and the entertainment industry. The second thing that's happening is there's been a huge loss of jobs. So, we're going to have to cut the we're going to have to make the suit to suit the cloth. And we've got very little cloth now, so it's going to be a much smaller suit. Lots of unemployment. People are going to move back in with their families. Parents are going to move in with their children. You must just accept that. And then finally, I guess there's been a huge destruction in wealth, and people don't get that as well. That a lot of people have been wiped out, and restaurants, SMEs have just been wiped out. And I was looking at Book a Table. They said that 60 to 70% of firms that shut down because of this crisis are not coming back. So there's been a huge transformation. So our normal is going to look very different to what we've seen, and even travel doesn't expect to get back to its previous volumes. And maybe if that's the way you want to define normality, we're only going to be back to those previous volumes 4 to 5 years from now.
Okay, so if not normal, then I'm assuming you're going to tell me digital is the way to go. But I want to ask you, is digital a bit like a buzzword right now? Does it deserve the status it holds?
There's always been a buzzword to describe what we are trying to do and what the major force in our existence is. And to a large extent, these terms are actually created by marketing departments. Because everybody wants bragging rights, and we all want to have this ability to put a shine onto whatever it is that we're selling. So if you went back to when I was a child, one of my first gifts was a electronic radio. And prior to electronic radios, you had radios that used, I guess, tubes. And I didn't have a radio like that, but I got this radio that was amazing. It was electronic. It had a circuit board, and I was amazed by this. And suddenly there were toasters and kitchen appliances that were all electronic, and cars became electronic. So the word was electronic TV, electronic radio, electronic appliance. And then somebody invented something called the transistor, and so everything became transistorized. And then we took the transistor and we put it onto an integrated circuit board, which meant that it was microelectronics. So it was really small. And so the word microelectronics began to become the word that we used everywhere. And then along came the internet, and it became, E. And so we had, e-commerce and e-book and e-banking. And then we were able to do this on our phone, and it was M-commerce and M-banking and mobile. And so today we use the word digital. The fact of the matter is none of these words are meaningful. They're all words that basically describe the fact that there's actually one trend. And that trend is that technology is becoming embedded in our lives, and we're just struggling to find words that make it meaningful. We pick on one thing, and we use that little thing to describe this huge trend. And so it's my personal view that in a few years' time, the word digital will fall away, because technology is going to be like gravity. It's going to be all around us. You're not going to notice it's there. It's going to be like air. Fish don't know they're swimming in water. We are not going to know that we are swimming in technology. And that's where it's heading to. This word digital will fall away.
And not really a question we prepared, but I think we might have discussed this on one of our previous chats. What is then the next trend that we can look at in the next sort of, I want to say short term? I've read Di-Volution. I got all the way to, I didn't read it. I was actually listening to a podcast. I got all the way to podcast number 31. And that is very far away, I hope. But what are we looking at in the next couple of years as those trends?
So I think there's a kind of near-term view, a medium-term view, and a longer-term view. Let's call it Horizon 1, Horizon 2, and Horizon 3. If you look at Horizon 1, I think we're really talking about the next 5 to 10 years. It's all about recovering from this mess that we've got ourselves into. And I think in the world, you're going to find a very interesting thing happening. You're going to find a world of abundance and scarcity simultaneously. And people don't get this, right? That we actually have an abundance of music. So for $10 a month, which is what I used to pay for one CD, right? I now have access to, millions of songs. I think it's the figure is something like 8 million songs. And if you pay, I think it's $10 a month, you can probably get access to, 30 books a month on Amazon Prime, Amazon Kindle Unlimited. And my understanding is, I've just published a book, so I know this, there are 4 million books on Amazon. Okay, so basically, for $10 a month, I have access to almost every book ever written. And for $10 a month, I get access to every song ever produced. And for $10 a month, I get access to every movie ever made. So for $30 a month, I have astonishing abundance. I also have access to the internet, which gives me access to the collective wisdom of the world, and I can carry on. So you have massive abundance on anything that can be digitized. Because the minute you digitize something, I can share it abundantly with everyone, and the marginal cost drops to zero. Now, at the same time, we've got shortages in jobs, food, housing, clean air, clean water, sewage, and sunlight, etc. So you've got simultaneously shortages and scarcity and abundance simultaneously. And that's the problem we're going to deal with for the next 5 years. And then there are going to be different kinds of problems emerging as we go into Horizon 2 and Horizon 3. But most of us are going to be struggling with the fact that, we've got to feed our families. And so where we were, I guess, 2 years ago, which is middle class, maybe most of us, and therefore we were at kind of the middle to the upper echelons of the Maslow hierarchy of needs. Many of us have been pushed all the way down to level 0, which is about shelter and food and survival. And in a sense, we've become survivalists for probably the next 3 to 5 years.
So if I can ask you, you spoke about Maslow, and it's a model that I absolutely adore, but do you want to take the viewers just through what that model looks like, just so we make sure everyone's on the same page?
Sure. I mean, look, what Maslow said was, we start at the very bottom, which is basically dealing with, I guess, our lizard brain, right? And so, the human brain evolved over millions of years. We have a lizard brain and a wizard brain. And the lizard brain comes first, right? The lizard brain is the medulla oblongata, right at the back. You touch something hot, it pulls your hand away. You don't even have to think about it. Okay, you get scared. All of us are scared of snakes. Why? We don't know. Well, it's engineered into your medulla oblongata. And so basically the base of your brain has all of these lizard functions. And they're basically 4, and they're all spelled with the word F, oddly enough. And those 4 functions all live there. And it's basically about fight or flight or food or fornication. Okay, that is an impolite way of saying that, but oddly enough, they all start with F, right? And so those 4 Fs are the most critical things, and they're at the base of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We need those 4 Fs. And by the way, take a lizard in the sun, right? And it's exactly the same 4 Fs. And that's why it's called the lizard brain, because us and the animals, we're all the same. Then you get to the next level, because the minute you've got that, you then want, well, okay, I've got fight, flight, fornication, and food. That's sorted. Well, now I need safety, I need security, I need a house over my head. And then I need, a little bit of kind of feeding my ego a little bit. And eventually I get all the way to the top where it's about, well, I've fed my ego. I feel like I'm fulfilling my purpose, but now I want self-actualization. And now I want to make sure that my life and my purpose are resonating with each other. So what's happened is we were up there, right up at the top, and we've been pushed all the way to the bottom, back to the 4 Fs, unfortunately. And unfortunately, I think it's going to get a bit ugly for many people, because, when people don't have shelter and jobs and food, we're going to fight. And so there's going to be a lot of, I guess, aggressive communication happening around us.
Okay, and we're seeing that already. Okay, perfect. So if we take a look at Maslow, as you were talking, we start at the physiological and then we move up to the more cerebral, the wizard brain, as you called it. I've never heard of that before. It is absolutely brilliant. I'm so stealing that. So as we move up to the lizard brain, the wizard brain. Sorry, the wizard brain. Sorry, yes, the wizard brain. I'm very big on purpose and meaning of life. Now, just by the way I've been put together, I was very lucky. I've always been in great jobs and I've always enjoyed working. So for me not to work, there is sort of like a lack of meaning, because that's where I contribute. And I know in podcast number 31, you say we're going to have this utopian existence where you won't need to work because of digitalization, things will be so cheap, everyone will have access, and what have you not. Please go and watch the podcast. I did not do that justice. But how are we going to make meaning in our worlds if we can't use our wizard brains to work?
So that's a great point, right? The challenge, I guess, of the wizard brain is that the wizard brain really helps us think. It's about cognitive skills rather than more manual skills. And the cognitive skills are wonderful because they help us solve problems. But in the absence of problems to solve, we start to create problems. So what the wizard brain does is, and it's an unusual aspect of humanity, which is that we have this ability to create outcomes that don't exist yet. We create visions of the future. And they're all possibilities. Humans do this. Animals don't do this. And, okay, it's very interesting. And so we create possible realities. And then we figured out ways to get there. The problem is that many people create possible realities and then they create anxieties from it because they make it happen in their mind as if that reality is happening now. And so people get this thing called stress. And stress occurs because we create a possible outcome that creates fear, and our body responds. The lizard, you feed this, the wizard brain feeds this into the lizard brain, and the lizard brain gets stressed. And that's exactly where stress comes from. It comes from the fact that the wizard brain creates outcomes that don't exist and feeds it to the lizard brain as if it's happening now. And that's where fear, anxiety, and stress comes from. And maybe you'll get heart attacks because of that. And so the wizard brain is powerful because we need to keep it occupied. And so in the world of the future, we've got to figure out, well, if everything's being made for us, because right now my house, for example, it's running on solar. People tell me that Eskom's going through various load shedding. I have no idea what Eskom's doing because it doesn't affect me. My internet works, my power works, I cook on gas, I've got a wood braai if I need to use it. So, we are fine. I'm basically removed that anxiety from my life. And so basically, what we've got to start to do is to figure out, well, what is, if everything's going to become free, like solar power for me is effectively free, right? And so, the internet is effectively free because it's like, it's, I don't know, what am I paying, 500 Rand a month, right? For internet, it's effectively free. So basically, as more and more things become free, what are we going to keep ourselves busy with? And here, what becomes important is called Man's Search for Meaning. Now, that's the title of a book written by a very famous author, Viktor Frankl. He was actually a survivor of Auschwitz. And he basically said the only people that survived Auschwitz were the people who survived beyond the pain. Because for them, they had meaning in their lives. I'm going back to do this when this is over. And so this purpose, this meaning was such a powerful thing. He said it's really important that all humanity is searching for meaning. And another author then created a blog where it's called The Burning House. And what he did was, he said, the picture of a burning house, how do you find meaning? How do I know what my meaning is? He says, well, the easiest way to do it is think of a burning house. You don't have to set your house on fire. But what you can do is imagine your house is on fire. What are the 10 things you would rush in for to carry out? It's not going to be your microwave. It's not going to be your big screen TV. What is it going to be? It's going to be things that are irreplaceable and that have huge importance to you. So the best way to start your journey on your life's meaning is start off by figuring out, and if, by the way, go to the blog, because what people have done all over the world is they took pictures of the 10 things they would take out. And they uploaded these pictures. And it was amazing how poignant that was, because you realize, wow, when it boils down to it, what was really meaningful to you were your baby shoes were the thing you went and fetched, because it was the one thing that connected you to your mother, or something like that. And from those 10 things that you took out of your burning house, that is where you can find your meaning.
Wonderful. So I must say, I do love that. You say it's the burning house. I will add it to the show notes at the bottom. We'll definitely go and visit there. Right. So meaning is there for basically in the eye of the beholder. And I agree with you. I read a beautiful book called The Tattooist of Auschwitz. And there was a guy who was Jewish, and he was a tattoo artist, and he would tattoo the numbers on everyone. And everyone said he's a traitor for tattooing the number, on especially like the young women and the young girls and the kids. And he said, but I made sure that they weren't hurt in the process. And so that's, to me, a beautiful way of showing the same thing. So we've spoken about jobs going away in the future, but in the meanwhile, in the short term, and especially while we're taking a look, as you said, at everything that's happened after COVID, the lockdown, the effect is global, what jobs will be important in the near future and why?
So I knew you were going to ask me this. So I pulled up one of my MBA slides.
Oh, wonderful. Okay.
And it basically says what skills are going to be needed in 2030. Right? Because by 2030, I mean, at the rate that we are currently developing artificial intelligence, many of the jobs that we do won't require us to be there doing jobs. What's going to happen to us? What kind of world are we creating? And what skills will we need? And those are other conversations, by the way, because if there's no work, how am I going to get money? And this concept of giving money for work actually is a problem. We need to find another way of giving people existence and ability to remain in existence. So for the few jobs that do exist in 2030, the two kind of skill categories are really social and emotional skills on the one hand, and secondly, higher order cognitive skills. So entrepreneurship, innovation, creativity on the cognitive side, and social skills around, the leadership, bringing people together, getting collaboration, facilitation, giving people comfort. I feel that's kind of where the world's heading to. You're going to have these two higher order forms of thinking. Because the problem is that many lower order problem solving skills, like figured out a way to get to work, I used to use something called the Johannesburg 123 map book. And I still remember opening it up. People would say, I'd say, so what's your address? They'd say it's here. And then I would go in and find the suburb, and it was, find the page and then look for the blocks. And so basically, we've moved from that problem solving skill where Google tells me how to solve that problem. So there are already thousands of problems that we used to solve as humans that now get solved by computers, which really means that we have to raise the level at which we solve problems. And so what are these more complicated problems? Number one. And number two, we know that computers really struggle with empathy. Yesterday, an article was published by an artificial intelligence engine explaining why, if you gave power to AI, they wouldn't take over the world and destroy humans. Now think about this. This is an article written by a computer explaining why, if you gave them power, they wouldn't kill you. Now this is where we've got to with thinking, right? With power. And so, already people agree that you don't really need reporters in the world. Most selection and curation of articles could be done by artificial intelligence engine. We've already got music being written by, if you take a lift or you go into many malls or department stores, much of that music you're listening to isn't composed or played even by a human. Because you see, if you look at the value chain of music, the person that wrote it, the person that came up with the lyrics, the person that played the music, and the person that has ownership of the music, they all get royalties. But if an AI engine does all of that, you don't pay anyone anything. And most music is formulaic. And so, we figured out with artificial intelligence how to create music. And so basically, I think we're going to have to raise the level at which we engage creatively, and from a problem-solving point of view, and from an interaction point of view, because that's where humanity is really going to end up.
That is really interesting. So I have to ask you this, and knowing me, I have to bring it back to the people stuff, because, I do love myself a little bit of people impact in business. Is the workplace going to become more human if we have to be better at soft skills?
So why does the workplace exist? It's really important. You go back and you think, when we were predominantly agricultural, the workplace was the farm. Then we got into the manufacturing world, and the workplace was the factory. Then we moved to the world of service work, and the workplace became the office. So now we are involving, we are working with things that don't exist. Workflow doesn't exist physically, right? Documents, and I'll email you a document. It's not a real thing. You're emailing it to me. Just give me your digital signature. I do that on my laptop. So in other words, do we need to be in the same physical location to have a workplace? And the answer is no. Today, it's been clearly demonstrated that a workplace is virtual. So in other words, workplaces are wherever we happen to be. We are now all road warriors. So going forward, I think there'll still be offices, I guess. But increasingly, you got to ask the question, why are we wasting all this money and cost and paying rent and burning up energy, having people come together to do what they could have done from home? And many companies, much of talent is going to say, I'm not prepared to work for a company that doesn't allow me to work from home. So I think you're going to have to accept that going forward, a lot of what's going to happen, I've been talking to the guys at Facebook and Google, Amazon, Twitter. They've all said to their staff way into next year, even South African banks, a PA at a major bank said she's only going back to work in January. So already you can start to see that work from home is going to become a longer term thing. So the implication becomes, we've got to figure out, how do we work remotely, but still create human warmth, human interaction, human contact, and human collaboration? And the answer is it can be done. I spent 3 days this week helping teams work creatively to design new healthcare solutions in Holland from Johannesburg. And it felt like we were in the same room. I was going into breakout rooms. I was giving them ideas. They were seeing me. And normally I would have jumped on a plane and flown to Eindhoven. But now I'm doing this work in Eindhoven from Johannesburg. And you know what? That was our workplace, was in Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams was our workplace. So I think you're going to find that we're going to have to figure out ways to handle the things that we normally need physical presence for. Because For example, nobody can tell how tall I am anymore. And so anyone who gets their strength and power from height is severely compromised by this. I love this because I happen to be a real short person. I'm 5'6". So as a guy who's 5'6", this really suits me, right? It really suits me. If you if you don't have a personality, you're going to really struggle with this, because if you can't project yourself, I have to do presentations where I can't see people. Now, if you can't picture people in your head, and you need to have people physically in front of you, you're going to really struggle with this. And so people with no imagination are going to struggle. And so there's a lot of things. I often rely on body language cues, tone, angle of head. I can't see if people are smiling, frowning, shaking their heads, because you can't see everyone's face. I sometimes present to over 100 people. I can't see people. Normally in an audience, you can pick up, I can see from the body language in the crowd, they didn't like that, etc. We're going to have to figure out ways of dealing with that going forward.
So then maybe radio presenting skills might become a real thing, because they speak into the void and open pray for them. Yeah.
Lovely comment, yeah.
Something that we've spoken about before. Do you think that this means that this move will be healthier for Earth? I know you've spoken about how our world is actually set up to, be negative, very capitalistic, and destroy the Earth. Do you think that we'll move away from that now?
Well, just for your audience, there's something fundamentally wrong with the capitalistic system that drives consumption. And so, when people say things like, well, we're going to pump liquidity in. Well, what are you trying to do? You're trying to get people to consume more. Well, we're going to make things cheaper. Well, all you're doing is making, is price elasticity means the cheaper something is, the more we're going to consume of it. And so the challenge that you have is that the entire world economy, including marketing, is geared around one thing, which is consumption. And you see this when people start to get older, because they stop consuming. They stop buying new beds, they stop buying microwaves, they don't buy new houses, they don't buy new cars. And so consumption gets very, very low. So you have people who are older with lots of money, but they don't buy anything. And so you get stranded money. And that's considered a bad thing. Actually, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe the world of the future needs to be designed to be less consumption orientated. So for me, I think what COVID has demonstrated is what the world would look like if people only consumed what they needed to. So we didn't drive, we didn't overeat, or maybe we did overeat and overdrink, but we definitely didn't kind of go on holidays. We didn't do a lot of the non-essential. So when the world only did the things that were essential, the world became very clean. And so the message here is very clear. There's something fundamentally wrong with the capitalistic system that drives consumption. So we really have to sit back and reset our macroeconomic environment. Now, there are many capitalists in the world who would scream at me. And for many years, I'm a rabid capitalist as well. And even I'm sitting back thinking, this really demonstrates to me that really we need a fundamental reshaping here of the world. Because we've got to take care of people who don't have jobs. We've got to take care of people who've been made redundant in this crisis. We've got to take care of the environment. And really, the capitalistic system does none of these things. So we have to really reshape that. And I think there's some big soul searching going on and navel gazing going on right now into exactly that, globally.
Okay. And do you think that there's another better framework? I read the book, The Conscious Capitalist, or Conscious Capitalism. And that was really heartwarming from the perspective of there's a way to create a win-win-win, where yes, people will need things, and yes, they do need to purchase it, but I create something that is really valuable and of value, and in the process, I actually provide employees with an opportunity to live and be purposeful. Is there a better way?
Sure. Look, I mean, fundamentally, we've got to go back to why does money exist, right? Because money exists because if money didn't exist, there'd be no way to exchange value. And value means, I've worked 9 hours in the field, you sat in an office, what's the equivalence of exchange for what I produced and what you produced? You deliver me water, I deliver you corn. What's the exchange rate? And, is it 3 bushels of corn versus, 1,000 liters of water? How do you figure these things out? And that's why money exists, because money becomes a universal way for trade. And otherwise we would have to barter. And it's very difficult to barter. So money exists for a very good reason. But the problem that we have is now we've become obsessed with this money, which is exchange of value. It became an end in itself. It was never meant to be an end in itself. And so really all we actually want is value. We don't really need money. If there was a way to get value without money, we should do that. And by the way, there's lots of ways you can get value without money already. Take LinkedIn. I give away huge value every day because I post constantly. I don't charge people for that. And, it's not about, I'm changing the world. I'm living my life. I'm serving my purpose. Millions of people. I mean, I think I get something like 5 to 10 million reads a year, right? On my LinkedIn feed. So millions of people are getting value out of something, and I'm not even asking for any money in exchange. And increasingly, this is the way the world's heading. A lot of us are saying, we don't want to charge for stuff that helps people. Why are we charging for this? This is dumb. So I think you're going to find that this universal basic allowance will arrive because you have to price things. If you don't price things and you make things free, well, people will become wasteful and people will overconsume. And so what you need to do is you say, if there's no price to electricity, I'll leave all the lights on, right? So you got to price it to give people a reason to cut back. At the same time, people might overconsume. So you'll get a guy who's running a furnace in his house, right, and doing pottery. So you got these two extremes. People become wasteful or they become abusive. It's the same thing with the internet, right? So the problem that we've got as society is to figure out, okay, if those are the two problems you're trying to solve for, right, isn't there a better way of solving for those problems while still being fair to everyone? And that's why I think schemes like Universal Basic Access, which, by the way, in South Africa, Universal Basic Allowance, we already have a Universal Basic Allowance. I think we've got the world's biggest Universal Basic Allowance running in South Africa because something like 30 to 40% of the country's budget goes towards a Universal Basic Allowance. It's called a social grant. Now, we're the only country in the world that spends this much money on a social grant. So we are there already. The problem in South Africa is you've got a very narrow tax base to pay for that, and that's got to be fixed. So I think the world's heading towards that kind of situation. And employers need to start thinking, how do they now reward and remunerate people? Yes, you can't move away from money. We get that. But you're going to have to start accepting that there's a fundamental shift away from defining money as the sole measure of success.
And so this is so interesting because it leads me to our next question. We know that, whether rightly or wrongly so, we have extrinsic motivators in business, bonuses, increases, whatever, commissions. I don't believe in those because I believe in intrinsic rewards, but these are very real things, and you have people who are very motivated, by achieving them. What's going to happen with that going forward?
No, I think we're going to move to intrinsic motivations far more. I mean, for example, I think allowing somebody to write the name inventor on a patent application is hugely motivational. I have my name on a number of patents for many of the companies I've worked for. I get no commercial benefit from that, but boy, it's really cool to know that you are an inventor and your name's on that thing. It's wonderful to have bragging rights to say, I will be able to present at a conference. I'll be able to attend and sit on a certain panel, advisory panel. I can attend Harvard, even if it's online. And so these things start having far more value. Things like I can go and help to build a home for homeless people. I can help to, help to recycle garbage in some way. I can contribute towards cleaning up the oceans. I think you're going to find, maybe we're all not physically going to be doing it, but clearly we're all looking for ways that we can make that happen and make the world a better place for those that follow us. And so I think, yes, there'll always be the extrinsic motivators. All of us want to get a better car, and better clothing, and better holiday. And we also, money makes us feel good. And also, it reinforces the family. Your wife loves you more. Your husband loves you more if you bring more money home. So I think we can't ignore all of that. Because if you come home and if I say to my wife, hey, sweetie, I didn't get a bonus this year, but I got this really cool voucher for a Harvard, online course, that's not going to carry me much favor in my household, right? My daughter wants her room done up. My son wants to build a computer. My wife wants to go overseas on holiday. So we have to build for that. But fundamentally, I think we have to accept there's going to have to be a huge focus now on ways in which we can help to make the world a better place. Because clearly the existing model doesn't work, and giving people more money isn't fixing that.
Another question that comes to mind, and interestingly enough, it only popped up when I was doing research about you and for today's preparation, is adjunct professor, Professor Gibbs, Cape Town University. There's a lot of academia in your context. And I wanted to ask you, what is the way forward for our children who want to study? If they want to show that they can perform in work, because as a someone who used to be a leader in the learning and development space, for me it was kind of like, well, I can't wait for someone to take 3 years to learn something. I need them to have it like now. Where are we going?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think I was born to be a teacher, and if it paid better, I probably would have stopped there. But unfortunately, it didn't. So I became a professional. But I've always had an academic component to my life for probably 30 years. Look, I think we have a very interesting view here on the future of education. The first thing is, clearly we've got digital distraction, and we've got a much shorter attention span, and people are a lot more impatient. So, to think about it, your average TikTok video is 1 to 2 minutes. Your average 9-gag video is probably 30 seconds, 15 to 30 seconds. Your average YouTube video is probably 7 to 8 minutes. Your average podcast is 14 minutes. You can see where this is heading to, right? So really, we're moving towards the world of what I call mobisodes, or mobile episodes, and short form content. So you really want to cut that content down. You want to make it more bite-sized and digestible. I want to eat it on the run. That's kind of the world that we're getting to, and that's fine for a lot of stuff. It's like the news. We'll pick up on the news throughout the day. You'll learn stuff throughout the day. How is news different to learning? It isn't. They're both exactly the same thing. One is, hey, this is what just happened. The other is, hey, this is what you need to know to survive in the future. Guess what? It's the same thing, right? They just delivered on different formats. So I think you're going to find that education is going to be more like infotainment. It's going to be more bite-sized, as I said. The challenge is going to be when you get, at the beginning of your career, you've got to create a big foundation for, I want to be a doctor. Well, dude, you've got a real problem here. You want to fly a plane with 400 people in it? Guess what? You're going to have to do a formal course. That ain't going to go mobisodes. You're not learning how to fly an Airbus A380 by sitting in your bathtub looking at your cell phone, right? You're going to be going in and running that flight simulator. And so I think you're going to find that for certain skills, you are, especially on the job training and remaining up to date, it's going to be mobisodes kind of thing. For core skills that require major certification, which is life endangering, you'll probably require this guild, which says you are not allowed into our profession until you can demonstrate the following things. Then we will give you the right to practice. And then in the middle, I think there's going to be a whole bunch of jobs where, you don't need certification. Many people now are employed at Facebook, Google, Twitter. They don't have degrees anymore because it doesn't matter. You don't need certification. If you hire a guy and he can't do the job, you pick it up very quickly and you kick him out. Okay, you can also test for skills before you hire them. So it's up to you to know. And whether you have a degree or not doesn't make any difference. So I think that those are the three pieces that I see playing out.
Oh, wonderful. So that makes a lot of sense, because you're right. Knowledge is almost snackable. It's sort of like pick up and go. Last question from my side, and it's a question around the performance of machines. So I'm still on my performance mission. When we spoke previously, I asked you about machines being able to take over the world. This is the big brouhaha. They're going to come and wipe us all out because they're going to be clever about us. And you said that it's unlikely because of the lack that they cannot work probabilistic versus deterministic. Do you want to talk to us about that a little bit?
Yeah, look, I mean, the way that computers work is really linearly. You have to create a logic. And so the minute you create a flow chart or a logic diagram, you're basically creating a very structured way of thinking that is what we call deterministic. In other words, you can determine what's going to happen based on what's just happened. And a lot of things in the world are deterministic. I've got this much fuel. I'm going to run out of gas there. That's deterministic. The engine's running at the speed. I've got a formula. And the minute you can write a formula or build a logic diagram and create cause and effect, you can get intelligence systems to make decisions. And there's a lot of that happening. I mean, planes fly themselves because so much of what happens in a plane is deterministic. It's not probabilistic. It's not you may run out of fuel halfway. You're not going to run out of fuel halfway, right? But there's a lot in the world that's probabilistic. The weather is probabilistic, right? The way the wind's going to blow in the next 5 minutes. The next car that I see on the road. Okay, the probability of having an accident. These are probabilistic things. And I think that there's deterministic, probabilistic, and then so far AI engines are very good at deterministic things, they're bad at probabilistic things, which is one of the reasons why we haven't yet all got self-driving cars, because we're solving the problem that a lot of what happens on the road is what's called stochastic. It's random. Some idiot drives. And the other day I was riding my bicycle, and some young girl on a scooter pulled out and didn't stop at a stop street. That's a stochastic thing. There's no way to predict that. So what you do is you got to build systems that can think and respond to random outcomes. And I think we're still struggling with that, number one. And the other thing, of course, is that we need engines to start thinking. We need an inference engine. You need to start to infer from inadequate information. You got to start to guess. I think this is possible because. Okay, so I should slow down because there's a sharp corner coming in. I have no visibility on the road. And in my map, I can see that there is a junction, therefore I should be slower. And I can infer what I need to do. It's not deterministic. So I think that's part of the reason why AIs haven't taken over the world yet. Also, the fact that there are many, take for example something like walking. Now, walking seems like easy, or we all do it. How many other animals in the world walk on two legs all the time? Nothing. Nothing walks on two legs. Any idea why? Well, it turns out that walking on two legs is freaking hard. Because remember, essentially walking is about falling constantly.
And stopping.
Right? And stopping. So you got walking is controlled falling. Running is falling faster and controlling faster, right? And so what you got to think about is the human brain's got to keep its center of gravity between its feet. Now, if I said that to you, keep your center of gravity between your feet, you're like, I don't know what that means. Your brain does it automatically. So we've got a brain that's able to maintain our balance while we're running, jumping, we're doing parkour, and we're maintaining our balance. Now, humans don't understand how much processing power that takes. We don't have a computer today that can do that with a robot. So we haven't built an artificial engine that can walk. Just think about what I just said. So there's no AI in the world that can walk. Now you've all seen the videos of Boston Dynamics. Those things all have power supplies, and they also have 4 legs. The ones that have 2 legs, you can see if you push them from the side, they fall over. And so we can see we're at least 10 years away from building a robot that can walk. So never mind thinking, walking is what we're struggling with. We're struggling to get them to drive cars, right? So you can see how far away we are. Now, in fairness, self-drive cars are far safer than human-driven cars, right?
I was concerned about that.
Far safer. And people often switch over, you'll see this, people switch over to self-drive and go to sleep. And the car's driving them on the highway, and they're fast asleep, right? So a lot of people have already started to trust their cars to drive them to where they need to go. So are we getting there? We're getting there fast, right? With certain things, we're getting there fast. With other things, not so fast. But the message is, when it comes to creative thinking, we're a long way from that. Unless you can create a formula. As I said, art has a formula. And music has a formula. Even movies, right? Game of Thrones was a huge success because all that Netflix did was figure out what do people want to see. Well, it turns out men and women around the world love to see, a frozen environment with lots of swords, dragons, huge amounts of incest, people cutting heads off, men in skirts. I mean, that's what we wanted. And guess what they did? They pulled up this insight, created a movie, and guess what? We're all hooked on it, right? And we hooked on it because they knew what we wanted. And there you go.
Okay. Herman, thank you so much. I didn't think Game of Thrones was going to ever sound quite that interesting. But thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the insights. If anyone wants to reach out to you with regards to your books or anything else, is there an email address we can give them?
Sure. You can give them herman@futureadvisory.co.za.
Herman, any final thoughts before you leave us?
Yeah, look, I didn't want to create this impression that we have a dystopian future in front of us. It was very interesting. This week I was working with a number of Europeans and Asians in one of the biggest healthcare groups in the world. And we started architecting what a possible future could look like. And everybody ended up creating this future that looked very dystopian, you know. And I said to people, you know, I think we often don't understand the power of humanity for hope and caring. And I think we do hope and we do care. And the definition of leadership is leaders are actually merchants of hope. And so what we're looking for are merchants of hope today. Give us hope. And that is severely lacking in the world, by the way, because so many leaders lead through fear. So I do want to just say that I think the human's capacity for caring and hoping is really what's carried us this far. And I'm pretty confident it'll carry us forward as well.
Awesome. Herman, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. And I hope that in a couple of months or in another book's time, we'll be able to draw you back and have another cup of coffee with you.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you. And thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks, Herman. And everyone, thank you so much for joining us on another episode of Performance Cafe. We thank Herman and for his time and his generosity. And until next Friday, when I'll have the next coffee companion for you, I look forward to seeing you at the Performance Cafe.